In Washington, the mood inside the Oval Office was tense but deliberate. President Donald Trump faced the cameras with the confidence of a man determined to shift the national conversation. What began as a routine policy announcement on prescription drug prices quickly evolved into a declaration of political brinkmanship, a warning that the United States could face fiscal paralysis if negotiations with congressional Democrats failed. This was not just another press briefing. It was a moment that connected two of the most consequential issues in American politics, the cost of life-saving medicines and the fragility of the federal budget. For years, Americans had complained that they paid more for the same drugs than patients in Europe, Canada, or Japan. Efforts to close that gap had faltered under intense lobbying by the pharmaceutical industry. Now, with cameras rolling, the president claimed he had a solution, and he was prepared to use the threat of a government shutdown as leverage. Trump appeared calm but forceful as he responded to reporters' questions. He rejected the idea that a shutdown was inevitable, but admitted that it was likely because, in his words, Democrats wanted to extend health care to undocumented immigrants, something he argued would destroy health care for everyone else in our country. The remarks signaled that health care reform had become entwined with the coming budget battle. In the same breath, the president turned the shutdown threat into a political weapon. He warned that his administration could use a lapse in funding to take what he called irreversible actions, cuts to programs and positions that his opponents favored. To his critics, it was an unmistakable show of hardline brinkmanship. To his supporters, it was a sign that he was willing to use every tool available to control spending and curb what he called fraud, waste, and abuse. At the heart of the day's announcement was a new federal initiative, a digital platform branded as Trump RX. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Medicare official Chris Klomp explained that the site would give patients direct access to discounted prescription drugs, often at so-called most favored nation prices, meaning prices no higher than those paid by other wealthy countries. Klomp stressed that the platform was designed to guarantee consistently lower costs than patients currently face in the US, but it was the partnership with one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies that made the headlines. Trump announced that Pfizer had agreed to bring a significant share of its drug manufacturing back to the United States, a massive $70 billion commitment to reshore production and research. Equally striking was the pledge that all new Pfizer medicines introduced into the American market would be sold at most favored nation rates, eliminating the price disparities that had long angered US consumers. The president hailed the deal as proof that his administration could challenge entrenched industry practices and deliver relief to families struggling with the cost of medicine. Standing alongside him, Pfizer's chief executive, Albert Bourla, framed the move as both patriotic and practical. He said the agreement would allow his company to turn the page on years of debate over pricing and focus instead on advancing cancer therapies, better treatments for obesity, and more effective vaccines.
Albert, I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody behind me, because you are a great team. We have a great team. Everybody says you have a great cabinet. It's a great team. So thank you, Bobby. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Following up on Brian, this point is a shutdown inevitable. And how would you describe the negotiations with Democrats yesterday? Are more meetings scheduled?
So nothing is inevitable, but I would say it's probably likely, because they want to give health care to illegal immigrants, which will destroy health care for everybody else in our country. And I didn't see them bend even a little bit when I said we can't do that. Okay?
Bourla called it a historic moment, one that, in his words, would enable Pfizer to invest where people place real value. For ordinary Americans, the announcement promised a direct benefit, the chance to buy essential medications at prices similar to those paid abroad, but it also raised questions about how soon those savings would be felt at the pharmacy counter and whether other pharmaceutical giants would follow suit. Behind the scenes, the political stakes were just as high. Trump repeatedly praised Russell Vought, his budget director, for cutting government spending to levels that, he argued, could not have been reached through traditional negotiations. The president suggested that, if pushed into a shutdown, his administration would use the crisis to make deeper, lasting reductions in federal programs, an approach critics warned could disrupt services for millions of Americans. The potential shutdown injected uncertainty into financial markets. Investors watched nervously as the confrontation between the White House and Congress intensified. Democratic leaders accused Trump of holding healthcare reforms hostage to score political points, while Republican allies applauded his stance as necessary fiscal discipline. The clash underscored a broader debate about the balance between expanding access to healthcare and restraining federal spending. Healthcare costs had long been a flashpoint in US politics. Despite being home to many of the world's leading pharmaceutical innovators, the United States consistently ranked among the highest in drug prices. For decades, attempts to negotiate bulk discounts or tie US prices to international benchmarks had been blocked or watered down. The Trump RX initiative and the Pfizer agreement, if fully implemented, promised to break that pattern. But analysts cautioned that both legal challenges and political turnover could still derail the effort. The president's comments also revealed the larger strategy behind the policy push. Use the pressure of an impending shutdown to force concessions and demonstrate progress on pocketbook issues. This dual message, reforming drug prices while warning of fiscal retaliation, was designed to appeal to voters frustrated by both rising medical costs and Washington gridlock. As the day unfolded, reactions poured in from patient advocacy groups, economists, and political figures. Supporters hailed the announcement as a bold step toward fairness in drug pricing and a boost for domestic manufacturing. Skeptics argued that the administration's focus on headline-grabbing deals might not translate into sustained system-wide savings. Healthcare experts urged Congress to codify the reforms in law to prevent future reversals, especially if a different administration took power. Globally, the Pfizer deal sent ripples through the pharmaceutical industry. Other multinational drug makers faced fresh pressure to adjust their pricing models for the US market or risk losing favor with regulators and consumers. Trade analysts noted that reshoring such a large slice of production, $70 billion worth, could strengthen US manufacturing and research jobs, but might also strain relations with countries that had hosted those facilities.
These drugs will be available for direct purchase online at a website operated by the federal government. We're also announcing that moving forward, all new medications introduced by Pfizer to the American market will be sold at the reduced most favored nation cost. So we'll be paying essentially what other countries are paying, who have been much lower, much lower for many, many years. Furthermore, Pfizer will invest $70 billion to reshore domestic manufacturing facilities. In other words, they're going to bring a lot of their facilities to make their drugs and make what they make, their product. They're going to make it in the United States. I appreciate that $70 billion investment and fund research and development right here in America. We're working with other major pharmaceutical companies to secure similar agreements.
For patients, the stakes were deeply personal. Many had long faced agonizing choices between paying for expensive treatments or covering basic household needs. The promise of more affordable drugs brought a sense of hope, tempered by caution about whether political wrangling would once again stall progress. The clash between the executive branch and Congress also raised constitutional questions about the limits of presidential authority during a shutdown. Legal scholars warned that some of the irreversible actions mentioned by Trump could face court challenges if they were seen as bypassing congressional appropriations. As the budget deadline drew closer, television screens filled with images of late-night meetings on Capitol Hill, while markets tracked the negotiations minute by minute. Both sides accused the other of putting ideology above the public good. Meanwhile, the new drug pricing platform remained poised to launch, a potential breakthrough overshadowed by the looming threat of fiscal paralysis. In the end, the day's events reflected more than a single policy shift. They captured the collision of health economics, political strategy, and industrial policy at a moment when public trust in government remained fragile. For the Trump administration, the Pfizer agreement was evidence that bold tactics could yield tangible results. For critics, it was a reminder that progress on healthcare reform often came with sharp political edges. September 30th, 2025 will be remembered not just as the date of a press conference, but as a turning point in the debate over who pays for medicine and how far leaders will go to control the nation's budget. Whether it becomes a milestone in genuine reform or merely a chapter in a continuing political struggle will depend on the months and years that follow. For now, Americans watched closely, some with hope for cheaper prescriptions, others with apprehension about government instability, as their leaders wrestled with the intertwined challenges of health, economy and governance. The story of that day was not just about numbers on a balance sheet or prices at a pharmacy counter. It was about power, the power to set national priorities, the power to influence global markets, and the power to decide how the costs of care are shared. And as the cameras turned off and officials left the Oval Office, one fact remained clear. The debate over healthcare and fiscal policy in America was far from settled. The decisions made in those tense days would shape not only the nation's economic path, but also the lives of millions who depend on access to affordable medicine.
Action to investigate the unfair and discriminatory trade practices of other countries that extort our pharmaceutical makers to shift costs on
research, and everybody else is riding on our slipstream.
Not exaggerating when we talk about reductions of up to 80%. We give you 4 examples here, one for dermatitis. Number 1, as has been discussed, direct access for patients at Trump RX, which is a site soon to be launched, available often at full MFN and always at lower prices than currently available.
And Albert, I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody behind me, because you are a great team. We have a great team. Everybody says you have a great cabinet. It's a great team. So thank you, Bobby. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
At this point, is a shutdown inevitable? And how would you describe the negotiations with Democrats yesterday? Are more meetings scheduled?
So nothing is inevitable, but I would say it's probably likely, because they want to give health care to illegal immigrants, which will destroy health care for everybody else in our country. And I didn't see them bend even a little bit when I said we can't do that. Okay? They're not shutting it down. We're not shutting it down. We don't want it to shut down because we have the greatest period of time ever. I told you, we have $17 trillion being invested, so the last person that wants it shut down is us. Now, with that being said, we can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. And you all know Russell Vought. He's become very popular recently. You can trim the budget to a level that you couldn't do any other way. So they're taking a risk by having a shutdown, because of the shutdown, we can do things medically and other ways, including benefits. We can cut large numbers of people out. We don't want to do that, but we don't want fraud, waste, and abuse. These drugs will be available for direct purchase online at a website operated by the federal government. We're also announcing that moving forward, all new medications introduced by Pfizer to the American market will be sold at the reduced most favored nation cost. So we'll be paying essentially what other countries are paying, who have been much lower, much lower for many, many years. Furthermore, Pfizer will invest $70 billion to reshore domestic manufacturing facilities. In other words, they're going to bring a lot of their facilities to make their drugs and make what they make, their product. They're going to make it in the United States. I appreciate that $70 billion investment, and fund research and development right here in America. We're working with other major pharmaceutical companies to secure similar agreements.
We are ready to invest, as the President also mentioned, $70 billion in the next few years from Pfizer in manufacturing and research in America alone. I really think this is an historical moment, because also I can put that behind us and focus on the things that I want to spend my time, cancer treatments, to bring better obesity medicines, to bring better vaccines, to bring things that people value. And thank you for allowing us to do that.